Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel's weighing retaliations for an Iranian drone attack at sea, and this as Iran inaugurates its new president, the hangman of Tehran, Ibrahim Raisi. Meanwhile, as daily infections reach nearly 4,000, the Israeli COVID cabinet expanding its restrictions and travel ban listing. And finally, aliens again! Join ILTV and special guest Professor Avi Loeb as we look to the heavens in high hopes of finding far-off worlds and intelligent extraterrestrial life. We begin tonight with several security-related incidents. First, heavy fire exchanged between undercover border police forces and a torrent of Palestinian gunmen. And this during an arrest operation in the West Bank city of Jenin overnight Tuesday. No Israelis were injured, but the battle leaving 6 Palestinians hit by Israeli fire, one of whom is hospitalized in serious condition. Still, police are saying that the forces came under massive fire as the attackers hurled explosive devices, Molotov cocktails, and rocks at the troops. Meanwhile, also in the West Bank, an Arab-Israeli man arrested and another seriously wounded after being shot by Israeli troops near the north of the security fence. The IDF saying that 34-year-old Tawfiq Agbaria and another suspect were trying to cut through the fence when they were fired upon. Agbaria's family claims, however, that the IDF is lying, alleging that, quote, Tawfiq had no bad intentions and was shot without warning. Then finally, in another attack, the Shin Bet now probing into the stabbing of a 60-year-old man in Petah Tikva on Monday. New evidence lending credence to suspicions that the attack was nationalistically motivated. The suspected terrorist assailant, still at large though, managing to flee the scene before police launched their manhunt. Meantime, in Iran, hardliner Ibrahim Raisi, aka the hangman of Tehran, officially inaugurated today as the president of Iran. Raisi replacing the comparatively moderate Hassan Rouhani, and in his inaugural speech promising to lift the, quote, tyrannical U.S. sanctions and to keep Iran's standard of living, quote, free from the will of foreigners. Of course, the 60-year-old Raisi is also soon set to face a number of other challenges, including growing domestic unrest, ongoing nuclear talks, and potential retaliations for a deadly drone attack last week. Iran being blamed for targeting an Israeli-owned civilian tanker in which a Romanian and a Brit were both murdered.
I want to condemn again the attack on Friday against the commercial ship the Mercer Street, which was peacefully transiting through the North Arabian Sea in international waters when it was targeted by a drone laden with explosives, killing 2 people. We've conducted a thorough review, and we're confident that Iran carried out this attack. Iran's action is a direct threat to freedom of navigation and commerce. It took the lives of innocent sailors. We're currently coordinating with our partners and consulting with governments in the region.
So what comes next in this saga? Joining me to discuss is former Israeli National Security Advisor and Senior Fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, Brigadier General in the Reserves, and Professor Jacob Nagel. Professor, thank you so much for being with us. Now, starting with the Israeli tanker, despite vows to retaliate, analysts say that any potential response will likely have to come from Israel alone. And the United Kingdom is basically saying the same thing, that Israel needs to make its own considerations. Is Israel truly on its own, alone, when defending from Iran?
Look, everyone is talking about the tanker. It's important, but it's only one point in the continuous war between war, and it's one front out of some. When Israel is doing its continuous war between war, we always look on 3 red lines that we put on the table long time ago. Sometimes we are taking responsibility on what we are doing Israelis, and sometimes we are not. Now, the 3 red lines in the northern border, but also other places, are Israel cannot retaliate terror activities on its northern border. Israel cannot retaliate a transfer of game-changing weapons, mostly PGMs, precise guided munitions or others, from Iran via Syria to Hezbollah. And it includes, for example, if someone is going to use ships in order to transfer parts or technology. and of course, no Iranians in our northern border. So if something out of these three red lines is being breached, Israel probably doing something, and we cannot or we should not act only when and where someone is waiting for us. So means if the Iranians did something in the sea, it doesn't mean that our response, if it will come alone or with others, will be in the sea. They can do something on the borders, we can retaliate on air. They can do something in sea, we can retaliate under the ground. So this is one way.
All right, so on to related security issues now. A new report by the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change argues that as a result of Raisi's presidency, the IRGC will vastly expand to, quote, occupy the Iranian deep state while further entrenching itself in the visible state and increasing its access to resources and power, end quote. What does this mean to you in terms of how Iran will interface with the world?
This is exactly what I tried to say before. The IRGC, if there is a very faulty agreement allowing them to get all the benefits of an agreement without giving anything, going to a JCPOA minus, and getting all the hundreds of billions of dollars of incentives from lifting the sanctions, they will be able to continue their malign and really malicious work all over the world, supporting all terror activities and terror groups, supporting in our area, Hezbollah, Hamas, others, but not only in Israel, in the Gulf, the Houthis, and every place in the world. Almost every terror activity in the world today comes from Iran and from IRGC. So it's not an Israeli problem, it's the world problem. This is why I don't understand why the Europeans are going to inauguration. This is why I didn't understand before 2 days or 2 hours after an attack on French soil, I don't remember, a year or 2 years ago, the French foreign ministry went to Iran to talks. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy, wants to publish reports about Iran violations. Now, what the Iranians are doing in the negotiations, and the Americans didn't tell them no yet. No talking about the archive, no opening about the PMD, possible military dimensions, and no talking about our violations that the IAEA found. So why everyone say that one of the biggest achievements of the JCPOA is unprecedented monitoring and verification? What is the meaning of unprecedented monitoring and verification if they are doing it allegedly? Now they are not giving you to do it, and when you find something, you do nothing with it. So this is summarizing what you asked. It will be very bad for the world if the IRGC will get his hundreds of billions of dollars coming from lifting the sanctions without making anything to stop their nuclear program that is running, dashing 2030 out of all the restrictions. They will be a threshold country or they will be already a nuclear country.
All right. Professor Nagel, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much, and I was glad to talk with you. Thank you.
Now, in other news, coronavirus still getting worse and worse every day, with at least 3.78% of every test coming back positive. Major hospitals then reopening their COVID ICUs as officials in the COVID cabinet are convening to discuss tightening restrictions again. The coronavirus pandemic's dangerous trends continuing upwards. The Israeli Health Ministry reporting nearly 4,000 new diagnoses from Monday alone, the highest rate since March. And this adding to the over 22,000 active patients, 221 of whom are in serious condition. Likewise, the death toll since the start of the pandemic now at 6,492. The coronavirus cabinet then trying desperately to come up with strategies that can curb the virus's spread, but with the least impact on the public. Elderly and at-risk communities already lining up for their third vaccine shots, and the applications of the Green Pass system, reinstated last week, are likely to soon be expanded to include children under 12 and events smaller than the current 100-person threshold. Furthermore, with respect to travel, while tourists from abroad are still barred from entering Israel outright, the Health Ministry is recommending new updates to its travel risk listings for Israelis as well. If approved, on top of the PCR tests and the negative COVID checks necessary to enter the country, Israelis, vaxxed or not, will also be required to quarantine for 7 days upon arrival when returning from these orange countries: Cambodia, Colombia, Costa Rica, Fiji, Guatemala, Honduras, Kenya, Liberia, Mongolia, Myanmar, Namibia, Panama, Paraguay, the Seychelles, the UAE, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Return to Israel from the following red countries, on the other hand, is banned completely, even for Israelis. The red list including Argentina, Belarus, Brazil, Cyprus, Georgia, India, Kyrgyzstan, Mexico, Russia, South Africa, Spain, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and Uzbekistan. All right, moving on. The Abraham Accords have been leading to some wonderful partnerships, but this next one might just be among the most significant examples to date, and it's about water and food security. Israel has the second largest agri-food tech and water tech industries in the world, and startup nation Central, while working to build bridges through Israel innovations, is at the forefront of Israel's latest cooperation with the United Arab Emirates. Israeli innovation, whether you're aware of it or not, is building bridges across the globe, and particularly in agri-food tech and water tech, where Israel is number 2 in the world and is sharing its abilities to make the world a better place. That's why United Arab Emirates Water and Food Security Minister, Her Excellency Mariam bint Mohammed Saeed Hareb Al Meiri, is arriving in Israel to form a special cooperation with Israeli NGO Startup Nation Central, and her visit being for an initiative forefronted by the organization aiming to both help Israel and the Emirates target their mutual challenges with water and food. In fact, specifically, it'll pinpoint the challenges which various Emirati companies have, and it'll apply Israeli innovative solutions to help fill in the gaps. Likewise, at a special meeting taking place at Startup Nation Central's headquarters, the minister, together with the Emirati ambassador to Israel, meeting with top representatives of Startup Nation Central and other relevant startups to gain an inside look at the Jewish state's water tech and agri-food tech sector. Of course, not too new, the Emirati Embassy and Startup Nation Central have been working together since April 2021, sharing ideas and finding solutions that'll be an economic asset to both countries. And joining me now with more is Startup Nation Central's Vice President of Strategic Partnership, Eliran Elimelech. Eliran, it is so great to have you here with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so my first question is, tell us a little bit more about Startup Nation Central.
Sure, with pleasure. So Startup Nation Central is a non-for-profit and non-for-revenue organization meant to connect Israeli innovation with global challenges. We are 90 employees with offices in Tel Aviv and also in Jerusalem, and our main aim is to make sure that the Israeli high-tech sector will remain one of the main growth engines of the Israeli economy.
All right, so now let's add some context. What are the water and food security challenges that Israel and the United Arab Emirates share?
Sure. So in general, first we see the UAE, United Arab Emirates, as one of the key markets for the future of the Israeli innovation. In a way, we are trying to think and see how this relationship with the UAE will do a strategic spillover to our neighbor countries, and by doing like tech diplomacy and sharing tech and innovation, which are the main colors of the Israeli economy today, will bring us to a better situation from the geopolitical point of view. So we are sharing in common several challenges of growing agriculture in the desert, bringing water of desalinated water back to the citizens, and mainly also as well food safety and food security.
So, all right, now let's talk a little bit more specifics about this future collaboration that you have with the United Arab Emirates. What are the main goals?
So the main goals are mainly to expose Her Excellency, the Minister of Food and Water Security, to Israeli innovation. At Startup Nation Central, we have a very methodological way on how to do so. And there is an ongoing process of engagement, and while we are trying to expose her to technologies and maybe potential partners in the Israeli ecosystem.
All right, so during your tour with Her Excellency, the Food and Water Minister of the UAE, and the UAE Ambassador to Israel, you spoke to them about agri-food tech and about water tech. Was there something specific that you focused on or something particular that was especially important to them?
Sure, absolutely. I think their main, let's say, interest is to learn what is the Israeli experience and how come that we, such a small country, less than 9 million people, are so successful in terms of global innovation, mainly in the fields of agriculture and also water. So Today in Israel, there are more than 500 startups in the fields of agriculture and water. And this is actually their main interest to learn how this ecosystem has been developing along the years.
How many companies in the private sector do you think or do you estimate will benefit from these partnerships?
So we see a group of around 300 startups going to enjoy this potential partnership, mainly in the field of irrigation, water usages, and plant pest. So we have the deviation. By the way, all this information is free of, you can easily look at it on our platform called the Finder platform. This is an online search engine for Israeli startups, and very friendly engine to play with.
All right, well, with a name like Startup Nation Central, I'm sure you have plans for the future. What comes next? How would you like to see this develop?
So we would like to see more local companies, both Israeli and Emirates companies, collaborating with each other. From the UAE point of view, it's very important to have boots on the ground in order to develop your technology in the region. And we are trying to maybe support and accelerate such potential collaborations, mainly commercial ones.
All right. So much excitement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. The Abraham Accords could not have brought more prosperity, I think.
Absolutely.
Eliran, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now for the moment that we've all been waiting for, objectively debatable, potential proof of alien life among the stars, almost. Israeli astronomy professor Avi Loeb now launching the Galileo Project at Harvard University, which, with nearly $2 million in private funding, hopes to systematically search for and study UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, aka they're looking for possible evidence of extraterrestrial technology. But here to tell us all about it is astrophysicist, chair of the Harvard Astronomy Department, and co-founder and director of the Galileo Project, Professor Avi Loeb. Professor, it is so great to have you back with us. We talked a couple months ago when you first spoke about Oumuamua, which was discovered in 2017, a UAP which you've studied and asserted could be alien space junk. Now, how have your studies actually evolved in the past 4 years?
Right. In 2017, we discovered the first object from outside the solar system near Earth, and it looked weird. Didn't look like a comet or an asteroid. And since then, the US government had a task force and delivered a report to Congress identifying objects whose nature is not known in the sky above the US. And after that report came out, I said that it's about time for the scientific community to get engaged and identify the nature of these unusual objects near Earth. And that's what the Galileo Project aims to do. And it's called the Galileo Project because, as you may remember, Galileo Galilei changed our worldview by looking through his telescope. And the philosophers at the time refused to look through his telescope. So we shouldn't make the same mistake again. We should examine the sky and figure out what's out there.
Well, so are there other objects that maybe have crossed your path and piqued your interest recently?
Well, there are a large number of objects that were mentioned of over 140 mentioned in the Pentagon report to Congress. And that's an admission of the US government that its intelligence agencies are not doing their job in a way because they're supposed to know what flies above their sky. And I think the subject should move away from the talking points of politicians, military personnel, to the realm of science, where we will basically use telescopes that collect open data and we will analyze it in a transparent way. And gladly, over the past couple of weeks, I received private donations that make it possible. And I assembled a team of exceptional astronomers and scientists, and we plan to purchase these telescopes, equip them, analyze the data, and release it to the public and see what we find. It's a fishing expedition. We don't know what we will find, but we are open-minded. We shouldn't make any assumptions.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the Galileo Project itself. You know, how exactly did it come to be? You know, who helped you put it together? What will you be looking at first?
Right. Well, the administrator of the astronomy department at Harvard sent me an email one day saying you have a new research fund, and that never happens in academia. I asked, who is the person that gave me the money? Could you please let me know the details so that I can thank that person? And then another multi-billionaire sat with me on the porch of my house with questions about my book, Extraterrestrial, which was translated to Hebrew a couple of months ago, Chotzan, and asked me questions about the book, and then decided that he wants to donate funds. And altogether, within 2 weeks, I got $2 million. And there are many more people interested in both funding and participating in this project after the public announcement. And what I did was assemble a team of exceptional and dedicated and passionate scientists that would like to collect more data and address this question scientifically. You know, science is about reproducibility of results. And I was born on a farm in Israel, and I pretty much maintained my childhood curiosity. When you tell a child what the truth is, the child refuses to believe you. The child goes out and collects, assembles data himself or herself, gets bruised very often. But in that process, you learn new things. And we pretty much want to do the same. We don't want to look at classified data because it was not the very best instruments that we can imagine. We want to assemble our own data, make it open to the public, and analyze it in a transparent way. And that's the way science is done. And this subject, you know, should be part of astronomy, the mainstream, because we are using telescopes. Just to give you an example, a 1 meter sized telescope can resolve the head of a pin, a millimeter scale, on a human size object at a distance of 1 kilometer. So we can read off the label made in country X versus made on exoplanet Y. And we will figure out what these objects are. Maybe they are natural, but so be it. Whatever we do, we will find something new. We will understand something that is currently not fully understood, and therefore it's a win-win proposition.
All right. So my final question, you know, I've looked at some of the information on the Galileo Project, and I understand that it's going to be very systematic, as you've said, transparent. What are the chances that alien life, extraterrestrial life, intelligent life has already visited Earth, in your opinion?
Oh, in my opinion, it's quite significant because most stars form billions of years before the sun. And just imagine a technological civilization like ours or a little more advanced. We already have artificial intelligence systems that drive our cars and in the future make medical decisions about us. And if you send such a system into space, it's just like educating your kids early on about the principles that would guide them through life and then sending them to the world. And you send an artificial intelligence system to another planet equipped with a 3D printer, it could replicate itself. And in 1 billion years, such systems can populate all habitable planets within the Milky Way galaxy. Wow. So if such a civilization, only one, existed in our past, it could have already sent these probes to Earth. And it's possible that they are here. And that would be the answer to Fermi's paradox. Where is everybody? It's not creatures, it's not biological entities that we will meet. It's AI systems or that could outsmart us. And we will need to use our own AI systems to understand them, just like relying on our kids to figure out content in the internet simply because they're more computer savvy.
All right, well, you've given us some very exciting things to think about. Professor Loeb, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.22 shekels to the American dollar and 2.57 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well. Thank you so much for watching.